Okay, hello everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about my top 5 favorite eyeshadow palettes. Now, this was very difficult for me to narrow down and just pick 5. I love eyeshadow. It's one of my favorite makeup products, and I feel like every palette in my collection has value for, varying reasons, but I really stuck to my guns and I picked out 5. And okay, well, there's one honorable mention, but I feel like it doesn't really count anymore and we'll get to it. But I went through my palettes and I thought about how much I used, each of them, the shade selection obviously, and how well I could create obviously not one, but how well I could create well-rounded looks with each of the palettes without having to reach for a whole bunch of other palettes or extra shades to create a full look. Regardless of maybe I have to use a bronzer or something for a transition shade, or a highlighter for an inner corner highlight or something, but overall how well-rounded, in my opinion, for how I like to do my looks are these palettes. And I think I've actually picked out a lot of good ones. Okay, these are in no particular order, but first I'm going to talk about the Melt Gemini palette. I'm going to try not to ramble on about these palettes because I know I've probably talked about most of them already, but this is just such a beautiful palette. It has it all, really. I have the option of doing really beautiful, mustardy, slightly grungy, more neutral look, and I also have the option of doing a slightly grungier, mossier green look. If there's ever a time where I don't, really know what to do for my makeup, or I'm just kind of not really feeling inspired, I always pretty much reach for this palette and it never fails to disappoint me. I love Melt matte shadows. I don't always love their shimmer formula, but I love the tones of the shimmers in here. It has a black, it has lighter transition shades, but it also has deeper shades that allow me to create depth. So I really think this is just checks all the boxes and I love it. And if you have been eyeing this palette, I would really recommend picking this up because I've gotten a ton of use out of this. And I haven't had it for that long. The next palette that I consider to be in my top 5 is the Jackie, Aina, and Anastasia Beverly Hills palette. I love this palette. I think it's such a beautiful palette, such great quality. This palette is beyond stunning. I love ABH's formula just to begin with. I really think it's top notch, but also the color selection of this palette is just genius. It's perfection. You can create obviously quite neutral looks, warm neutral looks that are perfect for, if you can't have a purple smoky eye, but you also can create a purple smoky eye. So it really is the best of both worlds because you have your more everyday neutral tones, but you also have reds and pinks and purples and a little bit of green, and it's just perfect. It really is. Again, you have lighter shades. I do have to use a bronzer, I find, a lot of times to use as a transition shade, but that's not really a huge deal. But there is enough depth in here. There's a ton of depth, so you can create dimension, which is really important for me when I'm making looks. And the shimmers in here are beautiful. As I've said, this sponsored shade is like nothing else. It's such a beautiful duochrome shade. I absolutely love this wiggly shade. The lighter bronzy shades are beautiful as well, and it really is just so perfect. And it honestly beat out every other ABH palette that I have in my collection, including Modern Renaissance, because of how versatile this palette is. The next palette I talk about quite a lot, and I love it. This is the one palette that I always say, if all of my makeup disappeared, this is the first eyeshadow palette that I would go out and buy, and it's the Nubian 2 palette by Juvia's Place. This is just beautiful. It has such gorgeous, gorgeous tones in here. You have, you know, a more mustardy brown, but you also have an orange and a really beautiful, like, plummy burgundy shade. This Egypt shade is such a beautiful green. You have bronzes, you have a blue. The Zuri shade is a beautiful champagne. It also works really well as like a face highlighter. It's absolutely stunning. You cannot clock Juvia's Place's eyeshadow quality, and like I said, again, checks all the boxes. There's light enough colors and deep enough colors that you can create a ton of dimension to your looks. You can go really, really smoky or a little bit more natural and neutral, and it's just absolute perfection. I love this palette. The next palette that I have to talk about is also a really beautiful palette, but a little bit more unique. Not that the other palettes aren't unique, but this I think is one of the most unique palettes that I have in my collection. It's the Colourpop Good Sport palette. This is, I think, Colourpop's best palette in my humble opinion. But again, there's deep enough shades, you can create a lot of dimension. You also have lighter shades like a yellow and some warm browns, but you also have purples and greens. You can do everything from like a purple and yellow, like really vibrant look, to a more neutral look, to like a green smoky eye, and it's just absolutely beautiful. I love Colourpop's formula, and the metallics in here are absolutely beautiful. It's just such a good palette and such a unique color story that just works so well. Like, I don't think that I would have ever necessarily paired these shades together, but oops, I think my hand was covering that, but I don't think I would have necessarily paired these shades together, but it just works so well. Like, when you look at this palette and when you use it, it just makes sense. You're like, yes. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And then the final palette that I have, well, not the final palette, but the final of my top 5 is, I much debated over this. It was between this and the Anastasia Modern Renaissance, but I ended up making the executive decision that this was the one that I was going to choose, and this is the good old-fashioned Colourpop Yes Please palette. I actually haven't played with this in a long time, but when I was going over my palettes and, you know, kind of picking out which ones that I thought were in my palette top 5, I was like, you know what? I think this is, while you can create colorful looks with Modern Renaissance, the colors are a lot more muted, so you can wear color in a more like everyday environment, like for a presentation, to have lunch with your grandma, like have a meeting with your PhD supervisor. Like, it's a little bit more applicable to like more neutral ways to wear color, or more like wearable ways to wear color. This is definitely like, again, you can have like neutral looks with this, but it also is a touch more vibrant than Modern Renaissance, which is why I ended up picking it. Obviously, like tonally they're very different, but you know, they are like kind of along like the pinky, reddy, orangey type palette vibes, you know what I mean. But again, you have lighter shades, deeper shades, so I am able to have that like tonal variation and create dimension. I'm like literally a broken record, but I just love like the warm vibrancy of this palette. It's really, really special, and I think it's still, even though it was like really like popular when it came out and, you know, it was really hyped up, I think this palette like honestly still stands its own ground today, even with all the palettes we have. Like, if someone was like, oh, I'm looking for a warm, reddy, orangey palette, I think I would still recommend this palette to them, which is why it's in my top 5. And I just think it's such a good palette. Again, I love Colourpop's quality. I really, really love this reddy, like orangey shade. I love the yellow. I love like all of the like peachy, orangey, tangerine shades in here. I love the idea and like the tone and the color of this shade, chauffeur down here, but I don't love the actual like payoff. I find that this is a little bit of a dud in this palette. At least it's not like super bright and metallic. It almost like swatches like a matte and applies like a matte. So, because it has a little bit of a hard pad, but barring that, maybe they improved the formula over time, I don't know, but I still think that this is a really, really solid palette, and it's definitely one of my top 5 favorite, and it's definitely one of my top 5 favorite palettes when I really like theoretically put a gun to my head and pick my top 5 favorite palettes. Now, I did say that I had one honorable mention because I love to cheat, but it actually is the Morphe Jaclyn Hill Original Palette. Now, the reason that I didn't put this in my like official like top 5 favorite palettes is because there's a little bit of controversy. I know it's quite shocking because it's about Jaclyn Hill. Like, suspend your disbelief. I know it's like kind of hard to believe. Like, there's controversy about Jaclyn Hill, but given the fact that potentially the formula and quality of this palette that's being sold now, because this is like from the original launch, I don't want to be like, oh, go and buy this, because otherwise normally I would. I just feel like, I don't know. I don't want to lead you astray, essentially. But essentially, I feel like maybe I shouldn't recommend this to as high an extent as I maybe would have, given recent information that has come to light about, you know, potentially it's not the same quality or whatever, the palette that's being sold now. I don't want to lead you astray. However, likely the palette that is being sold now, the palette that's being sold now is probably still a really, really solid palette. Maybe it's not exactly the same as this palette that I have. Anyway, I think this is a really solid palette. I really like the variety of tones. Again, you have like, I mean, a lot of the looks that you can create with this are warm toned looks, orangey look, but if you like that, I think this is really, really solid. You also have a little bit of color down here, which I think are good. They're not my favorite colorful shades in the world, but I think they're good if you want to just dip your toes into color. And I don't know, I think this is a really good palette, and I think the tone and color selection in this palette is really, really quite solid and well thought out. So if you were interested, I'd recommend going and swatching it and seeing how you like it specifically yourself. Just because of everything that's happened, I won't put this in like my official top 5, but I do think this is a really, really good palette, and it's like slotted in there like right after palette number 6. So hopefully this video was a little bit more succinct and concise and just to the point, get you the information that you need to know right away, as opposed to my normal like rambling 20-minute long videos, which I'm doing right now. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you want me to do a palette collection video, welcome to the quarantine, y'all. I have nothing but time on my hands right now, so I actually could probably do that and include swatches of all of them, because God knows that's what I do in my spare time anyway. I just swatch eyeshadows. So yeah, actually that's a good idea. Maybe I should actually do that. Anyway, I will see you next time.